Am I getting thumbs up from the back? Sort of. It's really hard to see. Welcome to the second day of the 4th Annual Brooklyn College Humanities and Social Science Student Expo. Today, as we did yesterday, we will hear presentations from students taking courses in many of the departments and programs within the school, including modern languages, communications, arts, sciences and disorders, philosophy, Africana and Caribbean studies, classics, English, and communications. Each one of these student presentations is sponsored by a Brooklyn College faculty member who have trained or otherwise supported students in their intellectual journey this semester and this academic year. The Expo highlights the work of our outstanding humanities and social science students, bringing together student research in a single forum. Outstanding presentations will be rewarded with prize money generously donated by the Kitsch Foundation, and it's real money. Our award event will take place in early May in the Tau Atrium. Winners will be notified by email by the fantastic Jennifer Matisse. I can tell you from personal experience that students have been working toward this event and thinking about their presentations for weeks and sometimes months, and they're excited to share with you what they have learned. Taken together, these presentations offer a glimpse of the wide-ranging intellectual interests of our students and faculty and the high quality of thinking and research that they have produced. And speaking for myself, I am anxious to hear what you guys have to say and share. And I will turn the floor over to Professor Ranjit Singh, who's leading us off this morning.
Hi everyone, good morning. So happy to see all of you all here this morning to support our students. The first panel is entitled Subverting Power, the Caribbean and the Diaspora Sites of Resistance. And of course, we have 4 amazing students representing the Africana Studies Department and the Caribbean Studies program. And the students, right, their presentation center resistance, right? And the idea that the Caribbean is not just a place that you vacation, right? I know many of us probably need a vacation about now at the end of the semester, but it's very much more than that, right? We must speak about the legacies of resistance when we speak of the Caribbean and of course its diaspora. Good, so I know you're in for a treat. I'm going to call our first presenter, Katrina Alexis. And Katrina is a powerhouse. I call her, you know, she's a true scholar. And Katrina's presentation is entitled West Indian Gospel Music as Resistance. Katrina.
Thank you. We'll be talking to the...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good.
Good morning, faculty, staff, and students. My presentation today is entitled West Indian Gospel as Resistance. Now, a little bit about me. I was born in the United States to parents born in Barbados and Grenada. And by the time I was 2 years old, we had settled in the church we attend to this day on the corner of Linden and Schenectady in Brooklyn. The majority of the church population has always been West Indian, with parishioners from Grenada, St. Vincent, Trinidad and Tobago, so on and so forth. Growing up in West Indian church, music was a huge part of my upbringing. It's a part of every Sunday service and celebration. And in church, we play a wide variety of music, African gospel, contemporary Christian, as well as, of course, West Indian music. Now, while each of these genres have a long, complicated history, the one I am fascinated with is West Indian music. What makes this genre of gospel distinct from the others? To answer this question, we must begin at the arrival of the first enslaved Africans to what we now call the West Indies. Naturally, upon arrival in a new land, after being taken captive, the enslaved practiced their religions and their customs. This often involved the beating of drums, singing, and dancing to invoke spirit possession, which was very out of the ordinary for the Europeans, according to Theresa Reed, who goes on to assert that the efforts to coexist with the Africans and their strange rituals ranged from wholesale campaigns to expunge them through combinations of fervent prohibition and rapid Christianization to quasi-humanitarian efforts at multicultural tolerance. But no matter what the efforts were, the goal was the same: to subvert the enslaved by imposing the customs of the enslaver, particularly Christianity, as seen in a review of the state by James Philippo, a Baptist missionary in 1843, who writes, "Thus there is to be a visible and territorial if not an actual subjugation of the whole world to the power of the Redeemer. Now, these religions, uh, thus began the syncretization of the two religions to form the African-derived religions practiced throughout the region still today. These combined Christianity as well as the traditional practices brought over from West Africa. Now, these religions, more often than not, involved still the beating of drums or other percussive manipulation in the aid of spirit possession. However, this drumming, singing, clapping, and dancing was villainized by the colonizers, who did not feel that it aligned with their version of Christianity. It was looked down upon, chastised, and in some cases even banned, as was the case of the Spiritual Baptists of Trinidad and the Shakers of St. Vincent. The question becomes then, how did we get to the place we are now with West Indian gospel? Well, the answer begins with Pentecostalism. Now, what is Pentecostalism, right? It originates in the U.S. in the early 1900s, founded on the events of Pentecost, which occurred 10 days after Jesus' ascension, after his resurrection, in which the disciples of Jesus Christ were baptized by the Holy Spirit and began to speak in tongues. Now, the sect focuses on a personal faith with Jesus, as well as speaking in tongues due to the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And by the 1910s, there began to be reports in the Caribbean of Christians having a Pentecostal experience. And after the arrival of an American missionary to the island of Montserrat, the small Pentecostal church spread throughout the region. Case in point, according to Jamaican censuses, the percentage of the population that identifies as Pentecostal has jumped from 3.43% in 1943 all the way up to 36.51% in 2011. All of this to say that the nature of Pentecostalism, with its emphasis on receiving the Holy Spirit, makes it conducive to the drumming practices of the first enslaved Africans to the islands, as both have the end goal of being baptized by a spirit. In this iteration of Protestant Christianity, can expression through percussion be found and tolerated, if not encouraged? It is a very charismatic branch of Christianity, which calls for dance, song, and rhythm as a way of bringing God's presence. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, it is a charismatic branch of Christianity that calls for singing, dancing, and really allows expression in the way that was traditional of the first enslaved Africans brought to the West Indies. The Protestant Pentecostalism calls for dance, song, and rhythm as a way of bringing God's presence down, and in this way fits in very well with African-derived practices. In Pentecostalism, could African descendants continue to express themselves with the tools of their ancestors, despite years of its suppression? Now, with these churches firmly positioned in West Indian society, it became time for what was happening in church to spread to the world. Towards the end of the 20th century, the music, recording, and distribution industry had reached the West Indies, and artists like Joseph Niles from Barbados, as well as the Grace Thrillers from Jamaica, began to record original songs as well as covers of classic hymns, with a distinct West Indian sound, such as this one by Joseph Niles, How Great Thou Art. Now, let's take a listen to how it is sung originally. This is the classic version, so to speak. As you can hear, a choir, some strings, an organ, all of that to make this. Now listen to the version recorded by Joseph Niles in the late 20th century, early 2000s. As you can hear, there's a clear shift in the way that the music is presented, with the drums and the bass carrying the music throughout. Now, soon after the release of these labels by West Indians, this sound made its way across the sea to America, where American artists like Donnie McClurkin and the band Christafari began to make their own music in the style, which did very well amongst transnational West Indians, as well as American audiences. One example of this is a cover of Oceans, Where My Feet May Fail, done by Christafari. An American band started in 1989 that produces gospel reggae songs and covers as part of their missionary mission. So I'll let you listen to the original first. Now listen to this version done by Christafari, and you will hear the distinct West Indian sound applied to it. Yes. As you can hear, it has a very distinct reggae beat to it, especially in that one drop and that bass line in the background. Another example of this very well known Caribbean medley done by Donnie McClurkin, an African American artist who made this song specifically appealing to a Jamaican population. As you can hear, the drums carry the music, as in all of these cases. So, in summary, for West Indians and their descendants living abroad, the music is one of the key aspects of their identity, which gives them a way to assert who they are and where they are from. Its long history of oppression has culminated in the distinct West Indian gospel sound of today that many around the world, including me, enjoy. Thank you.
That was amazing. I am absolutely proud of Katrina. Let's pull up the next one. So our next presenter is Aaliyah Hinkson, one of my other wonderful students, and her presentation is entitled Black Women in Dancehall, Bodies and Power. So we move from gospel music to we're going into the dancehall now. All right, all yours. Mm-hmm. And this is the volume. Okay, I'm gonna raise a little.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My presentation today is Black Women in Dancehall, Bodies and Power. And I will be specifically talking about the history of dancehall, how Black women in dancehall use their bodies as a form of resistance, and how dancehall changed over the years. All right, so everybody knows about dancehall, but what exactly is dancehall? Dancehall culture is a space for the cultural creation and dissemination of symbols and ideologies that reflect and legitimize the lived realities of its inheritance, particularly those from the inner cities of Jamaica. So, as we know, dancehall is a male-dominated genre, and it allows men to stray away from their positions in society and transfer them into another being. Men start to become more attractive when they enter into dancehall music culture. One of the things that dancehall culture also makes public is the genre, not the genre, the idea of homosexuality being discredited with comical to lethal conversations because it challenges heterosexual masculinity. And common themes also discussed in male songs are money, poverty, homosexuality, job, which is also known as God, money, and women. So now I'm going to play a small clip of a song called Boom Bye Bye, which basically entails the fact that homosexuality challenges heterosexual masculinity. And please pay attention to the lyrics as you can hear as to what he's saying. Sing the chorus of the song pretty loud. In this chorus, he states, boom bye bye in a batty boy head. Rude boy now promote, no nasty man, them happy dead. In that particular lyric, he is making fun of homosexual men and states that they need to die. Homosexuality is looked down upon in Jamaica, and those who identify with it often hide or risk being killed. Sorry, I don't know. Okay. All right. Why? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Women's portrayal in dancehall, the Gal theme. Dancehall is also oriented around particular themes that are brokered predominantly on the lives of men in dancehall. One of the themes is gun and violence, the other is Gal theme. Now, this theme talks about women's portrayal in dancehall, so it speaks to how they are portrayed in terms of what they wear, how they dress, how they move. So in Jamaica, women in dancehall were stereotyped to be promiscuous ghetto gals who have many children from different fathers and who would rather spend money they have on the latest fashions rather than on school fees, books, and nourishing food for their children. Women are both subjects and objects in dancehall. Though it is a male-dominated genre, the subject position often takes the back seat. Women's bodies are sexualized. Women are reduced to their sexual and sexuality, and in dancehall culture, the female body is degraded as what is and what is not beautiful. So in this excerpt I'm going to read, it talks about a woman named Anita and this man named Byron, who is basically saying that Anita shouldn't be a dancehall artist and a mother at the same time. So Byron says, what are you doing? This is the place for being a mother of my children, not the stage. We don't need more than one musician in this family. Anita says, hold on. Who are you to tell me how to be a mother? Since when, please? Why shouldn't I be out there chatting the mic? Byron says, because you're my baby mother, that's why. Anita says, what kind of reason is that for anything, you damn fool? In this dialogue, Byron and Anita are disputing the fact that she wants to be a dancehall artist and sing on stage. He tells her he will perform with her on stage in a duet. However, Byron believes that because she's a mother, she should not be an artist too. This is one of the many views on women, that if they are a mother, they should not be or strive to be a dancehall queen or dancehall artist. In contrast, men are not judged if they are dancehall artists and fathers in the way that women are. Men are allowed the freedom to sing, dress how they want without judgment, or their role as fathers being questioned. Dancehall culture in many ways replicate these understandings as to the societal roles and behaviors of especially men and women. Resistance and bodies in power. After realizing they had little access to culture, women decided to use the one thing that they had control over, their bodies. In the genre of dancehall, women started to place themselves in male-dominated spaces, and challenged it with their use of style and extravagant moves. Dancing and performing was a way for women to be able to exert power and independence. For example, they performed dances such as head top dancing, where they're in a headstand with their knees bent and butt thrusted high. Even though this dance is sexualized, it goes against the ideas that their body is being shameful. It shows that their body is capable of doing the most exotic moves, despite their shape and size. They are able to change their oppressed and ridiculed body to one that is now loved. Okay, so now we're going to get into dance hall fashion as a costume. So in this picture, this is normally what we see, or when we used to see in the 90s, of women when they would go into parties and they would have their hair in color, they would have wigs, they would dress very sexually and of sorts. So women come out in outfits that show their bellies. They cut out holes at strategic parts in their shorts called bati riders. And they wear tight body-hugging dresses with cutout designs all the way up to their armpits, suggesting that they have nothing underneath. It does not matter if the women are fat. Black-skinned women go in for blonde wigs. They dye their hair in a combination of colors, burgundy, green, and orange. They wear chunky jewelry, earrings designed in the shape of a Jamaican map, a dollar sign, and a razor blade. Costumes are important to women in dancehall. It allows them to be in control of their sexuality, to be visible, and depart from their daily lives. In Mama Is That You by Carolyn Cooper, she critiques the Jamaican film Dancehall Queen. In this film, Marcia, who is a single mother of two girls, is a street vendor by day, but the costume transforms her into the dancehall queen at night. Marcia is able to enjoy the sensuality that she concealed in the grind of her daily life thanks to her persona as a dancehall queen. So I found this quote to be very important in terms of how women are seen in the dance hall culture, and it says that this dance hall affirmation of the pleasures of the body, which is often misunderstood as a devaluation of female sexuality, also can be theorized as an act of self-conscious female assertion of control over the representation of her person. So her being in power of her body and being able to use her body for for to be able to show off her skills and to also be proud of who she is as a woman. Okay, so in this slide, I have two songs, one by Vibes Cartel called Bend Like Banana and Spice, So Me Like It. And when I play these songs, I would love for you to see if you can figure out the differences in terms of how they sing. Like most male dancehall artists, the woman is often portrayed in a very sexual way. In the second song, So Me Like It by Spice, she's using her body to show that she has the power to handle the man in a sexual way. It's like she's taking ownership of her body, and now the man in return is being sexualized for his body to appease her. With these two songs, we can see how lyrics can change the perception of how a male is perceived versus a woman. These two songs have similar tempos but different viewpoints. Sorry. Okay, so how has dancehall changed? Well, for one, if we look at these two artists, one is Lady Saw and one is Coffee. Coffee is now a newer dancehall artist that recently came out. Lady Saw is more in the time of the old dancehall, and we can see from their clothing how they dress differently. Coffee is dressed in a more modest way, while Lady Saw is still using her body to show that, with her clothes to show in a sexual way and sexualize herself. So, and it's very revealing also. So now I'm gonna play these two songs by these two artists, and we can see how dancehall has changed over the years with these two songs. Lyrics explains how there's a rivalry between her and another woman over a man. She also speaks about if you tend to a man and meet his needs, you won't lose him. On the other hand, in Coffee's song Toast, she isn't speaking about men at all. Instead, she's singing about how grateful she is about the blessings God has done for her. Based on these two songs, we can see how dancehall has evolved over the years, with clothes or costume as well as lyrics. Okay, and this concludes my presentation on Black women in dancehall, bodies and powers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really great. In my head, there's like gospel music and there's some dancehall. So let me just pull up the next presentation. So you will see that we'll be moving from the Caribbean to the diaspora. And our next presenter will get us to the diaspora. Our next presenter is another just amazing student, Marisha Sampson. And her presentation is entitled Kwekwe as Resistance for Afro-Guyanese at Home and Diaspora. This is the volume. The control the volume.
Packages.
It's on. You could lower it, you could make it higher. Okay. All right, and everything is down here. The mouse and stuff.
Hi everyone. Good morning. Hello everyone. Welcome. So today my presentation is going to be about Kwekwe as resistance for Afro-Guyanese at home and diaspora. So this is just my table of contents, the topics I'm going to be discussing in this presentation. So welcome to Guyana. This is a picture of the Kaicher Falls, which is said to be the largest single drop waterfall in the world. This is a picture of Stabroek Market, and this is a picture of the CARICOM Secretariat, or the CARICOM headquarters, which is located in Guyana. And this is our coat of arms, which at the bottom says, "One people, one nation, one destiny." Okay. So this is a map of Guyana, and Guyana is divided into many different regions. I am actually from this region right here, which is East Berbice Quarantine. So Guyana is located in South America, and the official language is English. Guyanese Creole is also spoken. It's spoken by a majority, if not all, of Guyanese. Guyanese Creole is said to be a language that's based on a mixture of African languages, English, Dutch, and is also influenced by languages spoken by other ethnic groups, such as Amerindians or Native Indians, Indians, Chinese, and the Portuguese. Guyana is also known as the land of six people, who are the Africans, the Indians, the Chinese, the Portuguese, the Europeans, and the Amerindians. There are two major ethnic groups in Guyana. There are the Indo-Guyanese and the Afro-Guyanese. And there's two major political parties in Guyana, which is the PPP, the People's Progressive Party, a majority Indo-Guyanese political party, and the PNC, the People's National Congress, a majority Afro-Guyanese party. Okay. So now we're moving on to historical context. During the transatlantic slave trade, Africans were brought to what is now Guyana, where they were enslaved and forced to work on plantations. They were expected to embrace Christianity and follow colonial systems and rules. They were penalized and restricted from practicing their cultural traditions, religions, and languages. This was done to stop enslaved Africans and their descendants from embracing their identities and cultures, to stop rebellions against unfair treatment, and to encourage assimilation into European religion and values. Due to systems put in place during colonialism, there is often a lot of tensions between these two groups. The Indo-Guyanese population and the Afro-Guyanese population, especially during election time. Many Guyanese tend to vote along racial lines or based on racial ethnicity. In a reading called Asian Diaspora in Latin America and the Caribbean, an historical overview by DeHart and Lopez, I've learned that the presence of Asians within the Caribbean was intentional and was intended to form a class between the white race and the blacks. So, Kwekwe, which is what I'm actually going to be talking about today. Kwekwe has many names, and the word Kwekwe in itself can be spelled in many different ways. So these are the spellings for Kwekwe. This is the one that I'm going to be using for the purpose of this presentation. It's also spelled like this, and it's also spelled like this. It's also called Karkale and Mayan in some places as well. So what is Kwekwe? Kwekwe is an Afro-Guyanese pre-wedding tradition that was created and passed down by enslaved Africans who were brought to Guyana and their descendants. It is a ritual that occurs on the night before the church wedding. So growing up in Guyana, I heard whispers that Kwekwe was the wedding. It was the wedding at a time when marriages were not allowed. Kwekwe is a pre-wedding ceremony where the bride and the bridegroom, who are about to tie the knot, are given advice, kind of like premarital counseling on what is expected during the marriage, and they're giving this advice from the community, specifically older members who are willing to pass down the knowledge that they have gained. During the Kwekwe, the bride's community and the groom's community come together to give support and advice to couples entering matrimony. This advice is given through various mediums such as proverbs, singing, dancing, etc. During a Kwekwe, there is no bad words. There is a saying that Kwekwe nage bad word. And this is said because during the Kwekwe, advice is given on conjugal matters in matrimony. And these conjugal matters can be demonstrated by the use of vulgar words and actions. Kwekwe is one of the few occasions where it's considered okay to discuss conjugal matters and where it's allowed to be demonstrated or discussed in public places in general. Okay. So, kwekwe as resistance. There are many reasons that I view kwekwe as resistance. I view kwekwe as resistance because it survived the laws and regulations that were around during colonialism in a time where Africans were forced to assimilate into European cultural practices, and also their culture was actively being erased. So another part of kwekwe that I viewed as resistance is the buying of both the bride and the groom. In kwekwe practices, the families buy both the bride and the groom. I view this as resistance against patriarchal and gender norms where the bride is usually the one that receives the bride price. There is also laws during colonialism and slavery. Laws were created that allowed the policing and banning of African traditions, cultural practices, and social gatherings. An example of this is the banning of the drum in many Anglophone colonies. So this can also be seen in America with the Negro Act of 1740, which is when South Carolina authorities initiated the Negro Act of 1740 that prohibited enslaved Africans from growing their own food, earning their own money, learning to read, and it also prevented them from gathering and using drums and horns and other loud instruments. In Trinidad, the banning of drums led to the creation of what we know today as steel pans. Another reason that I view kwekwe's survival as resistance for Afro-Guyanese is because to gain access to social mobility and financial security, many Guyanese of African descent embrace Christianity and distance themselves from traditional and cultural practices of their ancestors. However, in 1992, during an election, the PPP, a majority Indo-Guyanese political party, won the election, and many Afro-Guyanese felt marginalized. This led to the revival of Afro-Guyanese traditional practices such as kwekwe. So here we view kwekwe as resistance in the diaspora. After the 1992 election, where the PPP won, the number of Afro-Guyanese that practice kwekwe increased. This Afro-Guyanese traditional practice transcended the borders of Guyana. It is now celebrated and reenacted not only in Guyana by Guyanese, but also by Guyanese abroad. There is a yearly kwekwe celebration in Brooklyn, New York. It was previously called Come to My Kwekwe. It's now called Kwekwe Night. This is actually a link to the site that shows this poster right here, which is a promotional poster for Kwekwe Night. And it says the last kwekwe reenactment was on September 1st in 2023. So another reason I view kwekwe as resistance for Afro-Guyanese is because of the retention of African traditions in kwekwe. So we can start off by talking about kwekwe practice as a whole. So for the kwekwe practice, it actually starts at the groom's house, or the groom's family will find a location close to the bride's house, and they will stay there. And then someone from the bride's family will go to the groom's family's house and buy the bridegroom. So after the bridegroom is bought and they celebrate over there, the main event takes place at the bride's house, where the bridegroom's family walks down the road in the community singing, come to my kwekwe, come to my kwekwe, come to my kwekwe, and bring extra shillings, and other songs along that line. So we'll specifically start by talking about the ganda. The ganda is the performance place at the bride's house where the main performances will be happening. And in the ganda, first you have to open the ganda, and they open the ganda by pouring libation to invite the seen and unseen, so the ancestors and the people that are already in the event. And then I can actually play this video. So due to the banning, there were drums originally in Kwekwe, but due to the banning of drums, the drumming was replaced by the stomping of the feet, which can be seen in this video. Also, there's dancing in circular motions. So there's the stomping of the feet as they're dancing in circular motions. And there's also the call and response during the songs. There's the bride price negotiation, and there's the proverbs that are used during Kwekwe, which can all be considered retention of African practices. Okay, these are some of the Kwekwe songs. So this one is Good Night A, and I believe I can play. Okay. And this is the first song. And then another song that is played during the Kwekwe is called Nation. Okay, so the other two songs, I don't believe I have actual recordings for them, so I guess I'll sing them. Okay, so it says, so let's say the name of the girl that's getting married is Evelyn. When the bridegroom's family gets into the yard of the bride's family, they have to search for the bride. So one of the songs that they sing is Wonder where me Evelyn gone, search go find Wonder where me Evelyn gone, search go find Evelyn gone a cassava bottom, search go find Evelyn look your people come, search go find And then this is a song that highlights the bride price negotiation, which is it goes like this. The name of the mom would be Flora. So, hey Flora, na sell a gal, me go sell 'em. Oh, na sell a gal, me go sell 'em. Hey Flora, na sell a gal, me go sell 'em. Okay. And then this is just another song that also gets played. I'm sorry, it's not playing, so we're gonna move on. Okay. And these are some of the proverbs and sayings in Kwekwe. It goes, the old people say, married get teeth, he bite like crab. So that means marriage has teeth and it bites like a crab. And that just highlights the difficulty in marriage. And then this is teeth and tongue must bite, which is the teeth will bite the tongue eventually, which also highlights that fighting within marriage is normal. And then there's married na get back door, which means there is no back door or escaping from marriage. Once you enter it, you're not supposed to leave. Okay, and this is just a video of a Kwekwe reenactment that's actually taking place in Guyana. Okay, so Kwekwe today. Kwekwe is a pre-wedding celebration that joins two nations together. Kwekwe is celebrated by many Afro-Guyanese at home and abroad. There is still stigma attached to celebrating Kwekwe because it is viewed as an African practice, and most African practices are looked down upon and viewed as evil and doesn't conform to European society standards. It is understood as an important part of Afro-Guyanese identity and is a celebration of traditions passed down by our ancestors. Like most cultural practice, Kwekwe has changed over time. There is a yearly reenactment in Brooklyn, New York. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was the buying of the bride and the groom, which I thought went against patriarchal and gender norms within society. However, in most, after learning more about Kwekwe, I realized that a lot of what happens in Kwekwe reinforces gender norms in society, and this can be heard in the songs and proverbs that we went over before, where mostly advice is given to women on enduring hardships in marriage that are not meant to be endured. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, especially all the music and the singing. Loved it. I'm actually going to call Professor Dale Byam up to introduce our fourth presenter, because it is her amazing student that she's been working with for the past year or so.
Yeah.
So let me just pull up.
Seems like an eternity. Okay, so I have the honor, I didn't know I'd have the honor, but I have the honor to introduce one of my very favorite persons, and that is Desiree Letman. Desiree Letman is a former, she was a student of an earlier class that she'd taken with me, and I would describe her as someone who always asks questions. She is just an engaging person, and she's always trying to find new ideas and always sort of theorizing everything. So we are now working on an independent study together, and we'll work again next semester. But you'll enjoy her presentation, I'm sure of that. So come on, Desiree. This is the volume if you need.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I greet you all, and I appreciate you all for being here today, and all who may be watching. I know it's early, and I appreciate you all for taking the time to hear me out. So, Professor Byam said I love to ask questions, so it's only appropriate that I start by asking a question. Have you ever felt invisible within your classroom, within your studies, within the literature you study? Have you ever felt that your work or studies fail to acknowledge your background, your culture, your history? Does anyone in here know about sending barrels back home to your family in a far-off country? For those of you who do not know what I am talking about, a barrel is a large cylinder container that many Caribbean immigrants use to send back resources and goods to their families back home. Did any of you grow up calling your mother's best friend that has no biological connection to your family auntie? Okay, I know I did. But the reality is not represented within the classrooms. The characters within the stories I was introduced to within my literary studies never sent a barrel back home to their country or grew up with their grandmother because their mother was struggling to provide for herself. And it's not because these narratives aren't academic or they're not valuable, but it's because the institutions fail to recognize and include the necessity of these stories. So we write about the Caribbean to resist the normalization of Eurocentric ideologies and the cultural erasure of Caribbean spaces. We write about the Caribbean because my wonderful literature professors maybe don't know about Andrea Levy's Small Island, Edwidge Danticat's Breath Eyes Memory, Junot Diaz's The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, Claude McKay's Banana Bottom, Pauline Marshall's Brown Girl Brownstones, Naomi Jackson, The Star Side of Bird Hill, Derek Walcott's The Star Apple Kingdom, Zoshito Gonzalez, Ogadiah's Dreaming. Shall I go on? For the sake of time, I'll just stop here. But if we're thinking about how we could include some of these writers within our literature classes, I'm available after this presentation. You see, the true power of literature is embedded in its ability to resist the oppressor's version of history. Caribbean archivist Stanley Griffin once said that colonists are not the voice of the Caribbean, which is why it is imperative we write about the Caribbean and reclaim our voices which were silenced within the archives of history, literature, and misrepresented as inferior and invaluable. The harsh reality of history is that it often gets told through a Eurocentric lens that intentionally leaves out the experiences of people of color, women, and the exploitation and violence Black and Brown nations endured because of colonialism. We write about the Caribbean to resist this institutionalized approach to history that condoned the exclusion of Caribbean voices, trauma, and accounted their resilience for nothing within the archives. We write Caribbean literature to fill in the gaps and to introduce an alternative study of history. A form of history which acknowledges that literary and cultural expressions must be considered as having archival value. Andrea Levy, Edwidge Danticat, and Junot Diaz are all writers of Caribbean descent who demonstrate the value in their work through Caribbean novels. Their work goes beyond the Caribbean studies classroom. Their work is universal. Their works resist the exclusion and erasure of Caribbean history from literature and academia through the use of storytelling. These writers acknowledge the ramifications of cultural exclusion within mainstream media, which informs of the necessity of Caribbean literature all the more. I was amazed that people wanted to hear this story because I'd grown up thinking that I was worthless and the story of the Caribbean was worthless and the people who came from that area were worthless. This is what Levy remarks in an interview with Headline Books. Danticat says in an interview with UCTV, she writes children's stories because it's interesting to observe what happens to children in immigrant families. Once I began reading these novels, I became obsessed. As I began thinking about the families that the novels introduced in my own families, I realized that the novelists told a story that any Caribbean could have told. Their depiction of families and its complexities and the way they utilize their work to resist the confinements and containments of the nuclear family to portray a family that cannot be contained or confined to these neo-colonial institutions that declare a family is comprised of a mother, father, biological children, maybe a dog. These novelists introduced a family that exists and emerge in spite of colonialism. These families manifest as a result of colonialism, exploitation of land, cultural erasure, erasure of resources are only a fragment of the trauma colonialism inflicted onto the Caribbean. And these novelists declare through their work that in spite of this trauma, Caribbeans demonstrate resilience. These novelists demonstrate desperation, desire, the pursuit of resources, and struggles bring people together and introduce a new form of family through the lens of migration. The emergency family. Emergency families are a testament to the fragmented history of the Caribbean and are included within the works to demonstrate the sacrifices, insecurities, conflicts, and resilience, which are all a part of the realities many families face. It's the not so glamorous reality that the nuclear family doesn't quite acknowledge. Emergency families vary depending on each individual's desires and circumstances which inform their negotiation of that family. So whether it be social status, citizenship, or location, one must desire the opportunity to change his or her present circumstances above all ambitions. Although an individual may be willing to transform their present situation into a more desirable one, this individual may not be in the position to be able to achieve this ambition without the help of someone else. If no one in their biological family can help achieve them with this change, then one may resolve to seek out help from others with no biological connection. So it was the sacrifices that Edwidge Danticat's parents made to travel to America and leave their children behind in Haiti with their aunt and uncle to establish a better life for their family, which brought into existence the family we are introduced to in Breath Eyes Memory. I'm currently conducting an independent study on Andrea Levy's Small Island, Edwidge Danticat's Breath Eyes Memory, and Juno Diaz's The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, to show how factors such as migration, upward social mobility, and dreams are the contributing factors of emergency families. Okay.
That was so amazing. I think we had a very full panel. I think we're going to leave here with so much new knowledge, right? And I hope that we can understand again that the Caribbean is not a monolithic space. It's more than where you vacation, right? There is still some time. We have about 10 minutes. So do we want to open the floor for questions? Do we want the panelists to come forward and field some questions? About 10 minutes. Any questions from the audience? Any comments? Even though, you did a great job, that's a wonderful comment. Any comments? Any thoughts? Anything, So we have a hand.
I was about to say you guys all did amazing. I was just infatuated with everything that you did. But I was wondering, did you guys have any struggles finding your sources, or did you guys have such a connection to the things that you were saying that you know where to look and you knew what to find, or you already had it and you were writing around the sources that you already had?
You could each answer.
For my presentation, it was hard to find some sources because of what I was, my topic exactly was on resistance in Black women in dancehall. And they talk about dancehall, but like I said, it's male dominated. So you get you have the sources with all the males, and obviously I'm talking about males singing this and males singing that, but there's nothing particularly on them. But the reason why I did that was because when I was looking, I wanted to do my project, it was an in-class project, on dancehall, because it's something that I listen to a lot. But I wanted to look to see if there was any resistance. So when I was looking into that, that's when I found out that Black women actually resisted against the men with their bodies and the use of their movement. I thought that to be very, very, very interesting. So I said, hey, why not do that? And that just became my presentation.
For me, since I knew that I wanted my topic to be on West Indian Gospel, since I knew that we were going to have a final presentation, I knew that it had to start in church, where I go every Sunday. So that was my main source with the videos, the songs. And then after that, for finding written sources, it was kind of difficult because a lot of the sources were on the Caribbean, which for many people indicates Latin America and Spanish-speaking islands. So to narrow it down to the West Indies was a bit difficult, but because I had so much of a foundation from my personal experience, I had enough that I just need to fill in gaps with citations, written sources.
I mostly agree with Katrina. I did have a little bit of struggle finding my sources. My knowledge and background did help with me finding the resources for the presentation. So, yeah.
So I found for me that the literature was my best source. The text within themselves, the novels, those were my best sources because, like I mentioned in my presentation, like there's so many fragments within the archives. And I didn't want to rely on someone else's perception of the Caribbean. Like I lived this life. I come from a Caribbean family, so I knew what to look for. So I looked within the novels. I examined the families within the novels, and then most of the sources that I looked into tracked the fragmented history and like the migration of the Caribbean families, like different migration waves. That's what I looked into.
There's a hand to the front. Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Marisha. Because from your presentation, is Clifford still used as the marriage solution, or I see that you use the word reenactment a lot. So is it something that has kind of been lost in its original form and is now used as a performance instead of a wedding tradition, or is it still very ingrained in the culture as it was before?
Okay, so with every cultural practice, there's changes over time. So kwekwe has changed over the times, but it's now used as a like the night, kwekwe takes place on the night before the wedding. So it's, I guess, I wouldn't say it's a bachelorette party, but you could kind of get the idea. So yes, kwekwe still exists within Afro-Guyanese communities. There's also reenactments of kwekwe as well in different cultural or folk festivals surrounding Guyana.
Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry.
So I had multiple different topics that I was interested in pursuing. However, I did end up going with kwekwe because I myself am learning about kwekwe. I didn't know much about it before, so I found just learning about it very interesting.
I find myself fascinated like with so many different things within the novels, and I was just trying to piece everything together with like a puzzle. Like, oh, I'm interested in colonialism. I'm interested in like the migration. I'm interested in the families, and the families were the major thing that stood out for me. So I feel like just piecing all these things together like a puzzle and finding that through line, that's what made everything clear to me, and that's what made everything make sense. And that was how I found my thesis.
Yes, for me, like I said, I always knew I wanted to do West Indian gospel music, but the topic, the original progression of my presentation had said nothing about Pentecostalism, and it was quite different. It was more focused on gospel reggae than it was about just the general gospel music. But then Professor Ranjit Singh asked me a very good question, like, what makes your church traditions, your sect of Pentecostalism, conducive to introducing percussion into gospel music. And that's when I learned like more about Pentecostalism and decided to make that more of a focus in my presentation. The overall topic didn't change, but how I got there did change over time.
So for me, I love Caribbean music. So dancehall soca is something I listen to. For my topic though, I wanted to do carnival, so I was on that topic, but the sources wasn't as many, so I didn't know how to incorporate that. But so then I just chose to do music, which I chose dancehall.
I think we have one final question.
So when creating this presentation, I told my professor, I have no clue how to start this. I don't know where to go, how to do it. I know what I want to say, but in terms of how to put it out there so that you guys understand it, it was hard for me. Because the lyrics of certain songs, if you don't have that background where you understand that creolization of how the English language is told or what they say, it's very hard to understand it. Which is why I put music in my presentation so that you can kind of hear it. You might not understand it, but you can hear it now.
Yes, for me, I actually was supposed to play more samples of music, but I forgot to turn on the playlist. But I think over time you were able to hear some of it because I know that not everyone grew up in the same church that I did and hears the same music. But yeah, music, like Aaliyah said, was my way to like show the topic, show what I'm talking about, instead of just saying West Indian gospel with no idea some people having like what that is.
So I think for me specifically, I struggled with like getting my ideas out to you all so you could understand it. Kwekwe is more of like a performative act, so I wasn't sure exactly how I would be able to get that across. And I do feel like I did have some gaps in my presentation, so I wasn't able to completely get it across as the way that I wanted to. So it was really hard to like convey what I wanted to say, I believe.
Through my work, I wanted to challenge the perception of the Caribbean. And I wanted to establish this family as a family that we all know. Like, we all grew up in this family. The emergency family is all of our families. Whether it be, we temporarily had to go to our grandmother's for a week, or whether we went back home, like, for the summer, and now we're staying with relatives that we don't really know like that. So I wanted to challenge the perception of the Caribbean as being this foreign space that we don't identify with unless we're going on vacation. So in order to do that, I focused on the family, because I don't know anyone who came from a perfect family. I know the conflicts that arise within families. I know like the tensions and the struggles, but that's still your family. So like the family, in spite of all this, is resilient. And I feel like that's all of our families. So that was the trajectory. Like, that's where I wanted to go with my project, and just challenge the perception of the Caribbean.
All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you, panelists. And thank you so much for having us. And all the students who will present later, I wish you all the best. Have fabulous presentations. Thank you to the Dean. Thank you for this opportunity.